Homo sapiens, the most modern version of the human species, which is obviously you and I, origins point back to either the southern region of Africa or the East African region, according to paleontology records. In South Africa, scientists refer to this location as the cradle of mankind, and in East Africa, the highlighted area is the Omo Kabish in Ethiopia. Scientifically speaking, humans and modern humans are two completely different examples of a people. Humans have been around for about 2 million years. These particular beings, the first humans, are classified under Homo habilis. Homo sapiens, modern humans, we've only been around for about 200,000 years. Homo is Latin for man or human. Habilis describes a handyman and sapien describes a wise man. What separates us as a species compared to the rest of the animals is our ability of advanced operation of tools and how we articulate our speech to utilize communication. Habilis is talking about how at that time of our evolution we were using tools and shit. Homo erectus describes how our posture changed. We started erect, standing up straight. We was walking upright and shit. And Homo sapien, since sapien means wise, we was on some smart ass shit. Question is, with the whole scientific evolution shit, is like, well, how the fuck did we get so wise all of a fucking sudden? Well, that's where God comes in at.
We all come from a long line of a great creative force. But we weren't born as adults, at least as far as I can see. We were born and we evolved. And we don't evolve. Consciousness evolves. We just happen to be the vehicle that consciousness chooses to evolve into because we have all the things that are necessary. And when we talk about some of our distant relatives, you'll see how we were chosen quite by mistake. It wasn't done because we were destined. We were destined, but we weren't destined the way the other forms were destined. We don't have a specialization. Every animal form has a reason to be on Earth. We have no reason to be on Earth. But our reason to be on Earth is that unique consciousness that we then can give all others. So although we don't have a specialization, our specialization is in perfecting all of the other specializations. That's why netures were created. And that's why in Africa and amongst Native Americans and amongst many of the ancient civilizations, you have so much respect with nature because they saw themselves as one with nature. And that as you developed yourself through nature and became part of nature, that you could have the all-seeing eye of the falcon. You could be able to smell like the dog. You would be able to have agility like the cat. You would have the essences of whatever they saw within the animal. So the animal has the specialization, but our specialization is to bring that specialization to perfectibility. That's our specialty. And it was a unique God concept that just happened to have come to us because of a situation that happened in the forests of Africa.
But, you know what I'm saying, we ain't even gonna get all into all spiritual shit. We gonna stay with the, black shit. You know what I'm saying? Black is spiritual, black is God. But, you know what I'm saying, we ain't gonna get into all that. We just gonna stay with the history. So in conclusion, advanced intellect as a species of humans started in Africa with our ancestors. White people didn't even exist on Earth yet. The migration and worldwide spread of Homo sapiens is a scientific theory based upon data collected from ancient artifacts and fossils organized in chronological order. This is called the Out of Africa theory. I'll say that again, all of the Homo sapien aboriginal inhabitants of anywhere on Earth origins trace back to Africa by way of migration. So until someone finds a fossil in relation to Homo sapiens that dates back further than the ones we found in Africa, there's literally no convincing information to disprove this. Okay, so like modern humans didn't leave what we consider to be Africa today until about 120,000 to 70,000 years ago. Okay, so all of that time, Homo sapiens were in Africa, and then no soon as a group of people leave a made-up boundary, those same people are no longer African? The problem and confusion that comes about is, geographically, after these people leave the designated area of what people consider to be Africa, folks automatically differentiate those migrated people's existence from the African people. After we populated India and that Middle Eastern area, we moved towards Southeastern Asia. Before the Philippines and Indonesia existed, they were all connected by a big-ass peninsula called Sundaland. This area was populated 50,000 to 30,000 years ago by the Negrito people.
Seeing how these archaic human migrants largely clung to land when traveling, mostly traversing along rivers and coastlines, Southeast Asia was one of the first regions of the planet outside of Africa that they reached. Judging by ancient humanoid skeletons found throughout Southeast Asia, these proto-Southeast Asians had cranial shapes more in line with proto-Africans than modern Southeast Asians, meaning that no significant genetic mutations had yet occurred within the population that contributed to the facial and cranial structure of modern East Asians.
And before there was Australia and New Guinea, there was an area between them called Saul that connected those two landmasses as well. Now, through scientific research, archaeologists have discovered that the Clovis people are documented as the first to set foot in the Americas around 13,000 years ago. They supposedly migrated from Asia into what we today consider Alaska by way of the Bering Land Bridge. And once again, all of this is before white people existed. Folks like to focus on ancient Egypt or Kemet as the poster child of ancient African civilization because many think it was the first, when that is absolutely false. The significance of ancient Egypt or Kemet is that at its peak it was considered the most advanced and influential civilization, not the first, mainly highlighted for its significant evidence of recorded data. Civilization describes the advanced stages of operation based upon social and cultural development within a designated area by a particular group of people. So if you were a nomadic people, meaning a roaming hunter-gatherer, you can't claim civilization because of your constant movement. You may be a civilized people, but you don't have a civilization to thrive or an area to call your own. It's not that other civilizations didn't predate Kemet or didn't have a quality system of living. Kemet as an established lands, philosophies, and calculations seem the most substantial and accurate as it relates to history, according to European scholars, which is why Egyptians get pushed to the forefront. The oldest recognized kingdom of Africa is Tseti, located in ancient Nubia or the Kush region of the Nile Valley. A reference to this location today is the area in between Egypt and Sudan, give or take some land.
It must be now emphasized that Nubia is the mother of Egypt, just as Ethiopia is the mother of Nubia, and just as Somalia, Kenya, Uganda is the grandmother of Egypt.
Tseti means land of the bows. These motherfuckers was excellent archers. Ain't nobody want no smoke with the black ass niggas down south of Egypt with the arrows and shit. The land of Tseti's peak of civilization was between 3800 BC and 3100 BC, though it's been said that their first king could have ruled as far back as 5900 BC. Where the confusion comes in at is when the Tseti thrived, that area or region wasn't called Kush or Nubia yet. So the Egyptians predate the Kush Empire technically, but only by names, because Tseti was in the Kush region, but predates both those empires. King Narmer or Menes, founder of the first dynasty in Egypt, whose significance is highlighted because he was the first to unify Upper and Lower Egypt, decided after that unification that Egypt would set out to dismantle the powerful infrastructure created by the neighboring Tseti people. And just to put a perspective for you of how nice them niggas was with them arrows and shit, like, that wasn't the first time they had ever fought and shit. Egypt had to unify they whole shit to go fuck with them Tseti people. You feel what I'm saying? They had been fighting back and forth and getting their ass whooped. The difference between Egypt and the Tseti land, the Kush or whatever the case may be, Egypt, like, you seen, unified. Tseti was fine with having, they was very diverse down there. They was fine with having their little junctions and shit. And this is the beginning of the Egyptian dynasty and the beef between Kemet and Kush. Egyptians fucked with some of the Tseti people, the Majays in particular, and they were frequently used within the Egyptian army for their advanced archery skills, some willingly and some as slaves due to conquered territory. The people of Kerma, on the other hand, had complete beef with Egypt and wasn't too fond of them occupying Nubian territory. Egypt's first dynasty began in 3100 BC after conquering Seti. And for the next 800 years, Egypt was pretty much having its way. Some disputes and discrepancies here and there, but nothing too detrimental to the empire. That is until they ran into Kerma. During the Egyptian Middle Kingdom dynastic period emerges Kerma, founded in 2300 BC and lasts until around 1500 BC. Kerma was the oldest major kingdom outside of Egypt. Kerma used to beat the shit out of Egypt, and towards the back end of Kerma's reign, they had linked up with a neighboring Nubian kingdom called the Kingdom of Sai, and they both almost took Egypt all the way out. Like I mentioned before, Nubia was very diverse and could fend for themselves within their individual junctions. So you can imagine if any of them decided to team up, not so many folks could stand a chance due to their volume and skill of attack. During this time, Egypt is also fighting off the Hyksos, which are the folks up that Mesopotamia area as well. And then eventually, Kerma and the Hyksos become allies and then create the largest empire of Egypt's entire dynastic period, stretching from Syria all the way down to Nubia from 1600 BC to around 1500 BC. Under the rule of Amenhotep during the 18th dynastic period, Egyptian military go deep south into the Nubian Egyptian territory and conquers that is simply their own.
Having overpowered our rulers, they burned our cities without compassion and destroyed the temples. All the people were treated with great cruelty, for they slew some and carried off the wives of children of others into slavery. Doesn't that sound like a familiar account? This period is documented around 1650 or 1750, right around the same time of Abraham. Now, take a good look of the pictures that I showed earlier too. These were the Hyksos that you see right here. These were the invaders, just as you see them carved in stone right here. These are the people who came out of the Sinai. Some say from Mitanni, some say they were Hurrians. These are the Temerians who were indigenous to the Nile Valley, as well as the Ta-Nehisian brothers who were further up in the southern part of Egypt, or Kemet, ancient Ethiopia as some would call it. These were the Tamahu people who invaded from Libya from the west. They attacked Egypt after the 6th dynastic period. Now, it was this brother that we showed again, Thutmose I, who finally expelled them out of our land. Now, I'm showing this in reference with the temple, how our ancestors, you're witnessing, recording these people who came into our land, who invaded, and Thutmose I finally expelled them.
Side note, the term Kush derived from the Egyptians during the Middle Kingdom dynastic period. For reasons researchers are yet to discover, all of a sudden the Egyptians started referring to the Kerma region as Kush. Which later explains the emergence of the Kush Empire in 1070 BC when the Nubians gained their independence back. So to break this down, somewhere between 2130 BC and 1649 BC, the Egyptians started referring to that Kerma region as Kush for no apparent reason supposedly. And being that the Egyptians clearly didn't fuck with those people, I'm pretty sure Kush is just an ancient African version of a racial slur or something. Most of the historical accounts and information pertaining to ancient Nubian Kush come from the Egyptians. And being that their beef was prevalent, you can probably assume that ancient Nubian Kush got undermined when given insight towards their existence. Okay, now we're going to leave Kemet and Kush for a little bit and double back later, being that they were the most prolific of the ancient African empires and kingdoms, and take these next couple of days to focus and highlight on what the rest of Africa was doing around this same time. First stop, ancient North Africa, or Tamazgha as the natives referred to the land, was home to the Berber people, or Amazigh people as they called themselves. Amazigh means free people in their language, probably describing they was chilling while East Africa was fighting all crazy, and Tamazgha got changed into Maghreb when the Arabs and East Africans migrated over. These ancient North African beings are not only important to black history, but history in general, because these individuals were the ones who introduced Europe to modern civilization and a quality way of living. The Berbers consisted of the Moors, the Assyrian Arabs, Canaanites, and various cultures within the indigenous people who stationed in the northern proportion of Africa during the Homo sapien migration. Maghreb means western land in Arabic. So remember those Hyksos folks that was running down on Egypt? These are some of their descendants. I'm assuming that they named Maghreb western land due to the western migration from the land that they came from. Side note, a lot of Pan-Africanists like to focus primarily on the Moors as the ones who civilized Europe, but they're only highlighting the darker-skinned individuals of the Amazigh people, not taking into account as a whole they were a very diverse group of people.
Black. Like Negro, Ethiopian. Moor means black. Moor is not a people. Moor is a color. They have taken this word Moor and they have associated Moor with Muslim. There were Moors that weren't Muslim. Moor means black. There were Christian Moors. There were Moors that practiced a traditional African faith system. So that Moor means black, simple.
This is also what leads to the misclassification of Egypt and why some folks don't consider it Africa. It's like how the Greeks took over Egypt in 332 BC. Okay, I'm sure the Greeks was claiming Egypt as their territory because technically it was theirs now. But we all know, regardless of the fact that that would technically be European territory, that shit ain't in Europe. All in all to say, the conflict of identity with the Amazigh people, which is still prevalent today, is due to the fact that their existence is a potluck of indigenous North Africans and the migration of East Africans and Arabs, which leads to the undermining disrespect of their diverse culture. Ancient West African history is very prominent due to the importance of trade routes between North Africans and West Africans, but we'll highlight this later because we're still in the BC proportion of African history, and that didn't start until 641. The Nok people are documented to have thrived as the oldest recognized civilization in West Africa from around 1000 BC to up until 500 CE. Nobody really knows much about these people besides they relatively stayed in the same circumference of land, and they were skilled sculptors, farmers, and iron smelters, making them one of the pioneers of the Iron Age. And researchers so far have concluded that they just somehow vanished or something. There's no record of migration or natural disasters or foreign invasions. They just died out, I guess. I don't know. And while these mysterious ancient West Africans decide to vanish, later emerges the Empire of Ghana, or Wagadu as the native Soninke people referred to their kingdom, but that's not until 300 CE. So we're going to stop there because I can't really go any further because we still got to get out of Egypt and Kush before I can discuss the rest of West African history. And last but not least, ancient South Africa. The ancient indigenous people of South Africa are called the Khoekhoans, which means men of men's. Not to be disrespectful, but all that click talk we associate with Africa and shit, the origins of that language date back to these people. For the most part, ancient South Africa was occupied by nomadic people, and its first kingdom didn't come about till around 900 CE. In conclusion, wasn't much going on with the rest of Africa during the reign of the early empires and kingdoms besides developing cultures and civilizations. In Africa, as long as folks respected each other's space and way of living, there wasn't really any catastrophic beef between nations besides Kemet and Kush, and that's not to mention all the diversity that thrived at that time. All those different skin complexions, all those different cultures and spiritual practices, yet the only ones feuding on a major scale was two kingdoms out of all of ancient Africa, which was fueled by ego and a superiority complex also known as greed and power. If you notice the repeating theme, the infiltration and influence of outsiders are what cause internal conflict within a society or civilization and can often lead to its demise. The Kush Empire emerged around 1070 BC and lasted till about 320 CE. There's not much knowledge out there in relation to the Kush Empire until they conquered Egypt, so information pertaining to the kingdom in its first 200 years are very scarce. King Alara is said to be the founder of the kingdom of Kush, but his successor, King Kashta, was the first king of the kingdom to invade Egypt. And being that Egyptian perspective provides the most insight towards ancient Nubian history, it makes sense why King Kashta's significance is highlighted more than King Alara's. Now, even though Kashta gets mentioned more than Alara, Kashta was a Nubian king but wasn't an Egyptian king, therefore he doesn't get highlighted much either. Which brings us to King Payanki, or King Pi for short. King Pi was the first Nubian ruler of Egypt and founder of his 25th dynasty. His reign was from 744 BC to 714 BC. King Pi unified Lower and Upper Egypt and Kush, which made it Egypt's largest empire since his 18th dynastic period. He is not only an important aspect of African history, but Egyptian history in general, for his success towards the restoration of Egyptian origins and philosophies. After all these foreign invasions and rulers and shit, Egypt wasn't the Egypt folks know and love. And Payanki wasn't a fan of this new version of Egyptian theology and way of living. So he set out to restore Egyptian origins so that his citizens were living a productive lifestyle and were properly represented in respects towards the ancestors of that land. To put it in perspective, say you move away and then the area gets gentrified, and you and your folks decide y'all are gonna buy back the block. King Pi bought back the block with force. Okay, after he takes over Egypt, he goes back to Nubia and just rules from there and shit. And then he dies. After he died in 714 or 716 BC, some Egyptian Tefnut or whatever took over that Egyptian land that Kush was ruling. So now Kush's presence in Egypt was no longer, you know what I'm saying? After he died, this Tefnut nigga was ruling the shit. So that's the end of his reign, but that's not the end of the Kush Empire. For clarification, there's a Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. So when I say that the Nubian presence was no longer, that only correlates to Lower Egypt because the Kushites still occupied Upper Egypt after King Pi died. Side note, during this time, that Tefnut fellow was a self-proclaimed king, which means he wasn't renowned or respected for such a status. He just self-appointed himself as king after he got word of King Pi's death. Where we're at in history right now is the emergence of the Kush Empire, King Pi and all his successors, and their takeover of the Egyptian 25th dynastic period. This time period is very important because this is the last time Egypt is ran by Africans. After this 25th dynastic period, Egypt is ran by foreign invaders from there on out. After King Pi dies, arrives King Shabaka to adhere to the throne, who ruled from 719 BC to 703 BC and took back Lower Egypt. He's mainly highlighted for ordering ancient spiritual inscriptions to be transferred on the rock, described as the Shabaka stone. The only reason King Pi and Kush took over Egypt is because the Egyptians at that time were disrespecting his origins, in which the origins came from Nubia. So they like, yo, y'all not living y'all best lives and y'all technically disrespecting our ancestors, not respecting the ones of y'all land. So after King Pi dies and shit like that, Shabaka go up there to check the land out, and he sees that their ancient knowledge is getting eroded and shit. So he makes sure that shit gets transferred in the rock so that it can withstand longevity. King Shabaka's successor is supposedly King Shabitku, but it's not much information on him, and they don't even know when his exact reign even was. So we not even gonna highlight him, just know he possibly existed before this next fellow I'm about to mention. Next up is King Taharqa, which is one of the most prolific kings of this revolution. He's King Pi's son, and he ruled from 690 to 664 BC. King Taharqa is especially important because of his dedication towards maintaining the African origins of Egyptian traditions, continuing the legacy of his deceased father. You gotta understand, King Taharqa been fighting for this all his life. Like, his dad was already grown when he started this revolution. He was born into this revolution. He started off a soldier. He was the top lieutenant of the military when King Shabaka was in reign. So when he got to be king, this is all he knows. This is all he lived up for. Taharqa reconquers Lower Egypt and is the last African ruler of Lower Egypt, but gets ran out by the Assyrians 2 years later. So after Taharqa gets ran out of Lower Egypt, the Kushites still run Upper Egypt and Kush, which leaves us to King Tanutamen, who is the last African king of Egypt and reigned from 664 BC to 653 BC. Okay, after the Assyrians run Taharqa out of Upper Egypt, they leave their homie Necho I in charge, and they go up north to handle some more business, whatever the case may be. Okay, Tatunamen tries to reconquer Upper Egypt and kills Necho I in the process, but he never officially reconquers it, which means he was never named king. This is how the Africans got ran out of Egypt. So yeah, like the Assyrians were like really mad and like, yeah, ran them Africans down in the Kush and made them motherfuckers stay in Kush. We just settled in Kush and we just, whatever, fuck it, y'all can have it. We already got our traditions and shit already instilled. Fuck it, y'all can have it. Cause y'all a little too upset. In 30 BC, the Romans beat the Greeks, and Egypt is now taken under Roman rule, which makes the Romans the new northern neighbors of the Kush Empire. Okay, the Romans decide they want to expand their empire some more, but the Kushites ain't having it, because I assume they respected each other's military presence and negotiation was set in place instead of an initial war. To avoid conflict, the Kushites agreed to pay taxes to the Romans as long as the Romans stayed out of their territory. Eventually, the Kushites feel like this taxation is a bit excessive and starts rebelling. In the midst of all this tension, the Romans are trying to slowly creep into Nubian territory on the low. But as history repeats itself, the Roman Empire, which is currently occupying Egypt, is also fighting off Arabian forces as well during this time. I note, the beef with that particular area is due to the various aquatic pathways in the fertile land. Whoever controls that area accumulates the most profit during trade at that time. So pretty much everyone wanted to control that specific proportion of earth, which just happens to be Egypt. Due to the Arabian presence, Rome was too distracted to focus on the Kushites. So Queen Amani-Reines, queen of the kingdom of Kush from 40 BC to 10 BC, took advantage of these circumstances and launched an attack against the Roman Empire. Caught him slipping. To celebrate this successful attack, Caesar Augustus' head was dismembered from his statue and taken back to Nubia and buried in 24 BC. Side note, they didn't find that joint until 1910. During this launch of attack, Queen Amani-Reines captures 2 cities in the Roman Empire. But as history repeats itself, just like the Assyrians, the Romans get like super mad and run the Kushites back to their original territory. But during this process, burn down both them cities and capture thousands of them and sell them as slaves. Sometime after, around 21 BC, Rome and Kush renegotiate and they come up with a peace treaty, and Nubia no longer has to pay taxes. An Arabian force by the name of the Aksum Empire, which ruled Ethiopia from 80 BC to 825 CE, conquers Kush under the rule of King Azana in 330 CE. Because Kush is such a powerful military and wasn't accepting of outsiders, throughout its existence, everybody wanted smoke to recruit and enslave their soldiers and diminish their threatening presence. All in all to say, Kush became too weak of a nation to continue frequent warfare with neighboring invaders and was unable to prevail through its gradually weakened state. So as the Kush Empire is coming to an end, the beginning of a new kingdom is coming to existence across the continent. The Kingdom of Ghana existed from 300 to 1100 CE and is recognized as the first major kingdom of West Africa. It was known for its gold, ivory, and slaves, and was a prominent force and operator within the trans-Saharan trade routes. The Kingdom of Ghana traded with Arabs, Europeans, and North Africans for books, cattle, weaponry, and salt. In 1076, the Ghana Empire was invaded by the Almoravids, which were a Berber people in North Africa who decided that the native Soninke people of the Ghana Empire were going to convert to Islam whether they liked it or not. And not too long after the end of the Ghana Empire began the true spark of international slave trading. After the Kingdom of Ghana was invaded by the Almoravids, the area was broken down into states due to civil discrepancies amongst its people, and Ghana was succeeded by the short-lived Soso Empire. The Soso Empire decided to expand further south towards Mali and capture the city in the Kingdom of Kangaba and was a harsh ruler to the native Mandingo people. Eventually, a prince of the Mandinka people by the name of Sujata Keita forms a militia and kills the ruler of the Soso Empire. Mansa Sujata Keita then establishes his own kingdom and founded the prolific Mali Empire, which ruled from 1235 to 1670. Okay, so now let me give you the background on Sujata Keita. Sujata was born a prince, obviously because his dad was king, but he was also born motherfuckers used to bully him and fuck with him a lot, okay, but he got somewhat of a pass because his dad is king. Eventually his dad dies, and there goes his past, so everybody started to intensify the bullying and started really fucking with him and wanted to persecute him and shit, because they didn't eventually want being a leader and shit like that. Alright, so his mom takes him and his brothers and sisters and exiled him from that region and go to a neighboring region called Mema in Mali, and they accept him for asylum. Eventually, the Soso Empire is fucking everybody over, and they send some note over where Sujata's staying at, telling him that he needs to come save their people and fulfill this prophecy. So Sujata eventually has to go save the same motherfuckers that was bullying him his whole life and was trying to kill him. Side note, a little fun fact for you, Sujata Keita was also known as the Lion King of Mali. Abubakar II was the 8th man to rule the Empire of Mali from 1310 to 1312, and he has an interesting story. Obsessed with exploring the Atlantic Ocean and coming across this land on the other side he heard about from scholars growing up, Abubakar II was determined to discover what we call the Americas. He was so obsessed with this voyage that he honestly could care less about governing the empire. Abubakar II sent 2 fleets across the Atlantic Ocean. The first one was commanded to set sail and never return unless they come across land. They never came back. So he orchestrated a second voyage, and this time he went. Upon departing, he told his brother that if he didn't come back soon enough to succeed to the throne as king, he didn't return. Next to the throne is Mansa Musa Keita, which is obviously the brother of Abubakar, and the great nephew of Sujata. Mansa Musa is said to be the richest man ever. He was so wealthy it's indescribable, and it's unlikely for anyone to ever accumulate such wealth again. This wealth was acquired due to the empire's abundance of gold, being the chief operator of the most important routes of the trans-Saharan trade, and having the largest market of the trade a part of his empire, which was in Timbuktu. In 1324, Mansa Musa went for his Hajj, which is a mandatory pilgrimage to Mecca in the Islamic faith. During his travels, he bought an entourage of thousands, hundreds of camels, and tens of thousands of pounds of gold. Yes, that nigga walked and took camels from Mali all the way across Africa into Saudi Arabia. And he was a generous emperor too, so he was just giving out gold to whoever the fuck he seen. Like, it don't matter if you was rich, you know what I'm saying, if you was an elite, if you was like a peasant, if you was a local, it didn't matter. He was just giving out gold to motherfuckers. And he was giving out so much gold that he ruined a couple cities' economies and shit, and left them in a depression for like 10 years and shit, just giving out gold to people. Now, I don't know how true this is, but supposedly he came back broke. But that didn't matter because everybody loved him, so everybody was going to help him on the way. And all the money was back home anyway, so all he had to do was get back home. But that pilgrimage was the equivalent of Frank Lucas wearing that coat to the Ali Frazier fight. Africa, Mali in particular's true wealth was now exposed to the world.
You know, man walks around with $50,000 chinchilla coat and never even bought me a cup of coffee. There's something wrong there. Pay your bills, Frank?
I don't know what you're talking
Do you pay your bills, I asked you?
If you are not getting your share, maybe you need to talk to the chief of police.
What's my share? Because you don't even fucking know me. Maybe I'm special.
His name is Frank Lucas, originally from Greensboro, North Carolina.
Can I get some Skittles, some dips, Reese's Pieces,
Pretzel and a large popcorn.
A large? You got money. He got money. Get it all for him.
The Bantu population first settled in the western central region of Africa. Then towards the beginning of the century, they migrated towards the east and further south and populated the rest of Central Africa and the southern region of the continent. Bantu's population's migration is explained through linguistics and language shifts, meaning the migration of the people is dated based upon the studies of the language the people of the land were using at that time. The first recognized kingdom in the southern region of Africa is the Mapamgumbwe Kingdom, which was created around 1075 and lasted till around the beginning of the 14th century. Succeeding in power within the region was the Kingdom of Zimbabwe, which reigned from 1220 to about 1450. It was formed by the migrated Bantu people coming from the Congo during the second wave. These individuals are referred to as the Shona people. They took over the land and its early inhabitants and created the Kingdom of Zimbabwe. The kingdom is abandoned in 1450. Now, some say it was because of drought and famine, but it is also rumored to be because that they had got word of some foreign invaders arriving in the area soon to come. This area is later split into multiple territories, including the Kingdom of Butwa and the Kingdom of Mutapa. But in 1684, they joined together and created the Empire of Razwi to fight off the invading Portuguese and defend their gold mines.